Hey everybody, James Introcaso here. Before we start the show, I wanted to let you know that this episode of Tabletop Babble is brought to you by Code 2050. Code 2050 is a lightweight rule set extension that gently layers onto the D25E system without changing a single existing rule. You can use all the books you have that integrate with the 5e rule set to play Code 2050. It keeps everything you love about the greatest role-playing game: combat, races, monsters, magic, and adds tech, drones, cars, computers, guns, explosives. It loves tech. Everyone has a smartphone and every class has a basic computer skills. Some kick it up a notch, bending technology with their will by becoming hackers. Hackers, yep, 2050 has those. They've added 3 new subclasses to every 5e class. That's 36 subclasses in all. And many have a uniquely modern bent, like the Hacker Rogue and a custom rig that go together, the Urban Ranger, and its adorable drone companions, plus a hyperactive monk who does parkour, a smooth-talking bard whose fingers are faster than their mouth, and a bulgy barbarian with a bad case of roid rage. Check it out. I got to play Code 2050 as part of our DSPN Presents game this month, so you can listen to me playing it with Rudy and Noelle from Dames and Dragons and an amazing game designer named Cindy Moore. It's all run by the designer of Code 2050, a great dude named Matt Stamford, really smart. This was so much fun, and its Kickstarter is going on right now, so go to legendarypants.net/DSPN. That's legendarypants.net/DSPN, where you can browse the 2050 system resource document, learn a lot more about the world, which is incredible because it's our world updated into 2050, and then it's got dragons and kobolds and all kinds of awesome stuff. And you can check out the Kickstarter project over at legendarypants.net/DSPN. Also wanted to take a quick moment to let you know that tickets for the Don't Split the Podcast Network Gen Con panel are now available. Head on over to the Gen Con events. You can get a ticket for free. You are going to want to come to our panel. You can ask all kinds of questions of me, Rudy, cast members of Dames and Dragons, and Adventure Maidens. And afterwards, we're going to be hanging out. Where are we going to be hanging out? It's a secret. We're going to tell you at the panel. So you got to be at the panel if you want to roll with us afterwards. Plus, there's going to be prizes. Check it out over at gencon.com and then search for events and search for Don't Split the Podcast Network. We'll be there. It's Saturday at 5 p.m. This is Tabletop Babble. I'm James Introcaso. Today on the show, I am chatting with the one and only Rich Lescaflair. Rich has been on the show a couple of times before. He's an amazing game designer at DMs Guild Adept. He's part of Alligator Alley Entertainment, an amazing company that just put out a 5e sci-fi rule set called Esper Genesis. The basic rules are available for free. The core rulebook is here. It is beautiful. It has been play tested. It is amazing. Rich is a great designer, so you are going to want to check it out. Here is my conversation with him about how he brought the world of D&D 5e into a sci-fi realm. It's a really, really great conversation. I always love talking with Rich because he is brilliant. Okay, everybody, now I am here with one of my favorite people and one of the coolest designers I know, Rich Lescaflair. Rich, welcome back to Tabletop Babble. For people who don't know, who are you and what do you do in the world of tabletop role-playing games?
Thank you for having me on. The very first thing I do is I am really cool friends and Guild Adept partners with Mr. James Introcaso.
Yes, absolutely. I love, you and I have worked together on several projects now at this point, and I always love collaborating with you. I think your brain is just incredible, and Rich also can do it all. Like that's the other thing is I put words on paper. You can put words on paper, but then you can also draw maps. You can do layout. You can do art stuff. You are far more talented than I am, and you're an amazing game designer.
I'm not sure if I'm worthy of all that praise, but I appreciate it very much. It's all out of necessity. I was like, hey, I don't have anybody to do any of this stuff for me. I better just kind of do it. That's how it worked out. I guess I can formally introduce myself. I am Rich Lescaflair. I am a game designer. I am a DMs Guild Adept. I do writing work for Wizards of the Coast for D&D Adventures League. And I am also the lead designer for Alligator Entertainment, who produces the sci-fi RPG for 5th edition called Esper Genesis.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the things I want to talk to you about today is Esper Genesis. So Esper Genesis exploded onto the scene. Y'all had a Kickstarter that went very, very well. And the idea is you've taken 5th edition rules, you've adapted them to sci-fi. The basic rules are actually available for free on DriveThruRPG. We're going to link the basic rules and the core game over on our website over at don'tsplitthepodcastnetwork.com if people want to check them out. And they're amazing. This is just such a well put together product. The art is cool. The world is really cool. And the way you've put together the rules are great. And that's one thing I want to talk to you about. You've worked in a lot of different systems, I think is safe to say. Why did you think I want to make a sci-fi game that uses the 5e rules rather than starting from scratch?
I've played a lot of different role-playing games, but D&D has always been my mainstay, with Shadowrun kind of coming up a close second, to be honest. But, ever since 5th edition came out, for me, it was kind of like, a return to D&D as I remembered it. Back when I was playing 2nd edition, I had this whole kind of sci-fi world that I was plugging in to the system. We had our own sci-fi thing going, and there were 2nd edition sci-fi versions like Alternity and things like that. And we used to mix them together, and it was really easy to do. And that's what I loved about 5th edition. It was just everything was laid out as it was, and then the DM's guide came out, and it was just like, here are all these optional things that you could do with the game and still keep its simplicity and fun. And it just immediately attracted to me. I said, okay, well, I have to do this now.
That's awesome. Yeah. And it's one of those things that I've talked to Mike Myler, who's been on this podcast a couple times about. He's a big hacker of 5e and Pathfinder. And one of the things that makes it great is you can say to your friends, hey, we're going to play a sci-fi game, but the rules aren't going to be so vastly different that you need to learn an entire new rule set, right? Playing Esper Genesis is easy if you've played 5e D&D. The concepts at the core are still the same as far as the rules go, which I really, really appreciate. And it does work really well for sci-fi storytelling, particularly in the world that you've set up. So let's talk a little bit about the world for Esper Genesis. When you were setting it up, did you think, did you have the idea for the world and then apply the 5e rule set? Or did you think this is a world that I think the 5e rules are going to gel with really well?
I'll be honest. Well, yeah, I originally had the world. The actual setting itself was called Crucible. And it's based off of these ancient planetary-sized artifacts that are in space that generate an infinite amount of malleable energy, and it's the energy that gets harvested out of the crucibles that people use for day-to-day life now, to power starships, to power electronics, to power their cities, and everything is run off of the power generated from these things. And after a while, they found out that living beings were attuning to the power that radiated off of these things. They started, exhibiting abilities such as gravity control, mental powers, control of light, control of matter, and things like that. And people that achieved this level of understanding of how to manipulate the forces of creation, they attain the what's called Esper Genesis, where they become what's known as an Esper. And this was a concept I had that I was actually building my own rule system around. And at the same time, I was building just a sci-fi weapons and armor, set up like a little list for 5e that I was originally going to put out on DMs Guild, and we were just kind of looking at this thing, a couple of people said they were looking at the stuff and they were like, oh, these rules for weapons and the armor and everything, this kind of works. You should make a setting out of this. And I was like, I already have one. So yeah, that's kind of how it came together.
So you had the setting sort of ready to go in Crucible, and I think that's interesting, right? Because the Crucibles are a thing in the Esper Genesis world, right? And so you took the 5e rule set. How much do you think you had to change from the 5e rule set to adapt it for Esper Genesis? Because I don't want to belittle the work that you've done, because it is a ton of work, it looks like to me anyway, bringing the 5e rules into a sci-fi world.
The original thing was, well, it's 5e, it's malleable, it's workable, but I wanted to do something different. I kind of heard about people were coming up with ideas for a 5e modern and things like that, and they were constantly using the word deconstruct. We've deconstructed the 5e rules, and I'm like, why would you want to do that? Like, why? It's fun, it works, everybody's enjoying it. Why on earth would you want to actually tear it apart to build something? So instead, I decided to build a sci-fi framework around it, which sounds a lot easier than it actually is, because 5e was really built, to work in primarily a fantasy setting. So, I not only had to build sci-fi rules to work with the 5e system without changing the core of the basic function of the game, but I also had to build a world, because 5e, a lot of people forget that D&D actually has a setting. It's kind of like a base fantasy setting based off of a lot of existing writings. But dwarves and elves, and they all come from somewhere, and that's kind of the base of D&D setting. And this game didn't have one. Bringing the Crucible, the Celebrate Arc setting into 5e meant that the new sci-fi rules had to incorporate themselves into the setting, and at the same time integrate themselves into the game, which a lot of players did compliment me. They said it was actually one of the strengths of the system, because you can open up the book, and if you already played 5th edition D&D, then you can read the rules of Esper Genesis, including the Spaceship Combat rules, and including the rules for advanced weapons, advanced armor, the zero-G combat, and it all makes sense because it all uses customized rules that are still understandable, in the aspect of 5e. This also generated a semi-intended thing. I also wanted to make, obviously you make something for 5e, you want it to be compatible. But because even though there are new rules, they base themselves off of existing 5e rules, which makes the whole game and system compatible and customizable with anything else 5e that you pick up. You can pick up, any of the core D&D books and stick it right into Esper Genesis, and it works.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great, right? That you've got that. By not deconstructing it, you're able to capitalize on everything that Wizards of the Coast or Cobalt Press or anybody else puts out for 5e D&D, right? Because they can be slotted into Esper Genesis. At the same time, the rules you've built around it, as you've said, really do make it fit seamlessly. It seems almost effortless, what you've done here, especially because there's a lot of problems you tackled that 5e didn't have to tackle. The first thing that comes immediately to my mind that I see a lot is Spaceship Combat. Spaceship Combat is really hard to do in a role-playing game because essentially what often happens is there's some piloting skills. Somebody takes that for 3 sessions. They feel like they don't have the spotlight because, you're dungeon crawling through a complex and not actually driving a spaceship. And then that 3rd session for 2 hours they're the one making all the rolls while everybody else sits there and is bored. You sort of have solved, not even sort of, you have solved that problem with Esper Genesis. How did you approach that? Like, did you see that as a problem, or did you just come up with a system and you were like, hey, this works?
I didn't see it as a problem per se. I knew it had to be done, so I just kind of saw it as a challenge. I'm like, okay, well, how do I work this out? The one thing that everybody has to remember about fifth edition, what makes fifth edition D&D fun is that it's fast paced and it's easy. It doesn't make things overly complicated. Either something happens or it doesn't. Advantage, disadvantage. And everybody has their part to play. So I wanted to take that and incorporate that into Spaceship Combat. The one thing I did was I took a look at combat in the air in fantasy D&D, and it's so simplified. And I said, well, it needs to be a little more complex than this, but how do I make that work? So instead of making like a pilot as like a class or like a skill or something like that, I said, well, how about having the party, all of them participate in Starship Combat? And that's how I came up with the concept of the crew. Every single person has their role, every single role has maneuvers, and the party gets to work as a full-fledged team and decide how the ship is going to function and what the ship is going to do. Their general stats also modify the stats of the ship. So that way they get to sit down and plan out what their crew is going to be like, how, what benefits the ship is going to get. And it's almost like building a character just as a team.
And what's cool about that too is you don't have to go and use your piloting skill, right? A lot of it relies on things that you're already doing, that you're already using skills or abilities in a way outside of the spaceship that then also help you on board the spaceship, right? Which I think is great because it lets you build a Han Solo type character who is good both on and off the Millennium Falcon, which is really great.
Exactly. Yeah. The only thing I think in Starship Combat, the only character that actually needs a proficiency would be the pilot, and they just need it's a tool proficiency, like a vehicle proficiency. I know how to pilot a spaceship, and that's it. Everything else comes right off of your character sheet. The rest of the crew is the same way. They already have the skills to do what they need to do. The other thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to make the combat work at the same pace as ground combat. So a Starship Combat round goes just as fast as a ground combat round, so that way, you have those cinematic sequences where there's this huge battle in space going on, and then you have another team on the ground doing stuff, and things are happening at the same time. I wanted that, so that's how I had it incorporated to where you can actually have Starship Combat and ground combat happen at the same time, or the ship in the middle of combat with another ship, and combat happening on the same ship that's in combat. I wanted that to work too.
Absolutely. Oh man, that's so genius. And it really is in its simplicity too. It's I think sometimes when we tackle ship combat, we go too crazy with it. We go overboard. But I think thinking about it in the way of how does D&D handle vehicles, right? They handle it with this proficiency. If you're proficient with, vehicles land, you're able to do this. So if you're proficient with vehicles, spaceships, you're able to make spaceships work. And it does allow, like you said, then for these other sort of things, because there's so many in a sci-fi setting, there's so many other vehicles too, right? Usually there's, when I think about Star Wars, I think about speeder bikes and snow speeders and pod racers and all that kind of stuff too. That's out there that you can work almost the same way, it sounds like, as this. Does Esper Genesis have a lot of those kind of vehicles too?
Yes, actually there's another tool vehicle called Vehicles Planetary, where the society is advanced enough to where, okay, if you can drive a car, you can drive a hover car, you can use a hover bike, you can, so anybody with the proficiency, or even without the proficiency, if you don't have the proficiency, you just don't get your proficiency bonus, but you can still get in the vehicle and pilot it. So yeah, there are speeder bike or hover car chase sequences, and you can have multiple manned vehicles where you have different weapons. It incorporates a lot of what you see in the sci-fi movies, but still keeps true to, the simplicity of 5e. That doesn't mean, we have the Master Technician's Guide coming out in the fall, and that's going to be a little more catered to the fans of the detailed aspects of what about vehicle facing and the speed that I'm going, and
Sure.
it'll provide a lot of optional rules that you can put in or take out depending on how easy or complex you want to make the vehicles.
Sure, yeah. Another great thing about 5e, right? The rules modules. It's really easy to add or subtract rules as needed in 5e, and the fact that you've embraced that and we're going to see that in future releases is really, really cool. Hey, everybody, wanted to take a quick break to let you know that this podcast is brought to you by Dice Envy. DiceEnvy.com brings cool new dice to your door without breaking the bank. You can buy individual dice. They've got acrylic, they've got metal sets, they've got every color under the sun, they've got awesome color combinations. These dice are incredible. Or you can get one of 2 dice subscription boxes, which it could be a little gift for yourself or a gift for someone you love. The Micro Mystery Dice Box starts at $5 a month. Give yourself a nerdy little gift. Every month, 1 die arrives at your door. How many sides? How large? What are they made from? That's a mystery. Or you can get the original monthly dice box, which is 5 to 8 dice arriving at your door each month for just $15 a month. You are going to want to check it out over at DiceEnvy.com. When you check out, use the code DSPN10 for 10% off. It's an exclusive offer for DSPN listeners. DSPN10 at DiceEnvy.com, because you can never have too many dice.
All right, back to the show.
What other sort of systems, in addition to ship combat, what else did you find you had to really build out for Esper Genesis?
The 2 things that had to be probably play tested the most when I came out with the original Star Adventure was automatic weapons and the way shields worked. Zero-G combat also had to get looked at, and explosive grenades, because that can be grenades make things weird in certain in certain aspects of combat. So a lot of that had to get refined so that they were not game breaking and take focus away from everything else. So with burst fire weapons, we instituted things such as recoil. And for grenades, it depends on whether or not you have the proficiency. And we also have a fail safe where if you miss with your roll, then the opponent has a better opportunity to save or to take no damage, or you might miss them completely. Those were things that I wanted to incorporate. Zero-G combat was I'm a fan. I'm a big sci-fi fan. But sci-fi treats gravity differently depending on the genre. so I had to do a lot of Googling.
More of that is involved in game design than people know, I feel like. Yes.
I'm Googling. I'm like, how does a bullet travel in zero gravity? What does this do? What does that do? And then I had to build rules around that. Vehicles was actually surprisingly easy. Not starships, just vehicles in general, because they kind of work off of the same basis as most ground combat does. I also wanted to make, I didn't want to make space cells, space doors, and things like that. It's a whole new galaxy, so I had to come up with a whole new system of PC races. So there's 9 brand new races in the core manual that have nothing to do with fantasy at all.
But yeah, in fact, I wanted to ask you about that, right? So because I think obviously Starfinder comes to mind, right? The Pathfinder sci-fi version, and that, they did space goblins, space elves, space that sort of thing. Why did you say I want to create whole new species? What was the sort of impetus there?
I've been a fan of fantasy and sci-fi for as long as I can remember, and the 2 of them do relate to each other, but fantasy has a core. It has like, when you watch a fantasy movie, you expect to see a magician, an elf, a dwarf. All of these things come from the early writings, Tolkien and things like that, and D&D from the very beginning hasn't changed that much in regards to that. Science fiction is a different animal. There's so many different genres of science fiction. It goes in like a billion different directions, and a lot of times, it focuses more on the science than the fantasy. So, I wanted to create a very special, unique, and interesting player races that you would expect to encounter in space. Being made of energy. Somebody that a creature implanted with artificial intelligence that was constructed by another creature who harvests energy out of the crucibles. An alien race that's wandering endlessly through space looking for where they came from, and some of them aren't necessarily they're humanoid for the most part, but some of them have biogenetic similarities more to plants or to lizards or to stone than a human would. Things that just say sci-fi that make you go, wow, I wonder how that happens.
Yeah, I think you are correct about that, right? That we do see a lot of sort of different sci-fi has been all over the map, right? We could say Starship Troopers is sci-fi. We could say The Expanse is sci-fi. We could say Star Wars is sci-fi. If you were to sort of break down Esper Genesis, would you say it is science fiction or would you say it is science fantasy? Which one do you think it is?
Well, the setting that I put together, I actually wasn't sure what I was putting together until it was together. Because I have a lot of favorites. TV and movies wasn't my only thing. I read so many books. I played video games. I read comic books, and so I sort of took a lot of my favorites from all the different types of things that I did when I was young. So Mass Effect was probably my favorite PC game of all time. So I took a little bit of that. Phantasy Star was my favorite console series. The old Sega one. I took that. I took Ghost of the Shell out of manga. Star Wars, of course, which is my favorite of everything. And I just sort of put them together, and I said, like, okay, this might fit here, this might fit here, this looks cool, that looks cool, and it's just started to piece together like a cool puzzle. So I would say it's closer to space opera-ish science fiction than anything else. It does stray away from fantasy a lot, but it does stay true to the space opera aspect where it's still sci-fi, but everything is at this grand level where there's still cosmic powers and and alien artifacts and things like that.
That is really, really cool that you've found a good blend, it sounds like, that you are proud of. It is such a fun, cool world to explore. And it also, there's something cool about playing a different game where the species are different in the sense that not only do you have new options as a player, but also the creatures you face are more unknown. And that is fun. One of my hardest things about D&D is like my players should be scared of beholders, but they're not as scared as they should be because they know exactly what they're getting when they face beholder, right? It's like, oh, well, the eye rays will be random. We'll do this. Here's what we're going to do. Stay out of the anti-magic field. Like all of that stuff would be way scarier if you were discovering it for the first time. And I love that Esper Genesis has those sweet, sweet monsters we can get into.
Our primary artist, Santi Casas, he is amazing. He is an amazing artist, and he loves the setting. And he just sent me he's doing some of the art for the creatures, and he sent me a sketch for the Kanasi, which is like a robotic. It's a robotic species. It's a robotic self-evolving species, and they feed off of the energy of espers. And so he sent me this drawing, and he said I drew this because I wanted to make like a nightmare that was going to make the players crap their pants when they see this thing and not know what it does. And it's amazing looking, and it gets you really excited when you look at it because it is new and it's foreign, and like everybody's gonna look at it and go, oh my goodness, what is that?
Mm-hmm. Where do you go for when you are creating something new, a monster or a PC, species? Where do you go for inspiration? Are you looking at other sci-fi stuff? Are you just writing down wacky ideas when you get them? What's sort of your way of thinking about things?
I don't know. I sometimes I do research, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just kind of, hey, this will be great, and I either it works or it doesn't. I guess I like mixing things. I like taking concepts and putting together and creating new concepts out of them. So I guess that's mostly where I go. It's not necessarily research per se. It's more of like just things I remember out of when I was a kid that I thought was cool, and said, hey, that should exist, but it should exist along with this other thing. And that's how most of this gets put together. Honestly, I'd like to say that I'm some type of creative genius that just comes up with stuff, but no, I just have a very long memory.
I mean, that's super helpful in design is being able to have a long memory and that sort of thing. Do you ever get into this? Happens to me all the time where I'm like, this is the greatest idea anyone has ever had. It's so amazing. And then I start to put it on paper. I'm like, oh wait, this is actually, I'm making this thing. Like I'm making Eberron, right? Or I'm making the Klingons right now. Has that ever happened to you when you sit down to make stuff, or are you just every brain baby is its own brilliant, unique creation?
I mean, well, yes, that has happened a couple of times actually. Of course, the problem with taking things that and putting them together is that they tend to take a lot of similarities to something that already exists. So I think what often happens is that I'll put together something like half of the races that I came up with. I came up with the ideas. I'm like, yeah, they'll be great. I put them together, and I'm like, wow, this is this character from this show, or this is this alien race from this show, or this is this guy from this movie, and I have to kind of take it and tweak it into the first thing I'll think about is, okay, well, what would this thing be within the setting? I always go back to the setting as a base and say, well, how does this character, how does this player race, how does this class connect to the setting itself? And then that's when the other ideas start coming in, and then it becomes something unique. Because like I said, much like how D&D is created, every single race and character class fits in with the setting around it, and that's what I was looking for.
Man, I'm just I feel like I'm learning so much from you right now, Rich. This is great.
Thanks. I'm glad I can help. It is all trial and error for me. I was well. Let's put it this way. We have a Esper Genesis Twitch that goes on once a month, and one of the players is Cat Rambo, and I was like, I love Cat Rambo. She was going over like the player races, and she was talking about how interesting they all were because of how far you can actually go into them questioning what they are and who they are and how they fit into the galaxy and how they work with all the other races and basically reading what I wrote about them, and I'm like, wow, this is Cat Rambo, and I'm like, okay, I guess I did something right. So I was really happy with that. The setting though isn't fixed. It's a galaxy. There's an infinite number of stars. So we kind of did to risk using D&D terminology. We created the Saurian arc, which is kind of like the Flaness to the rest of the Greyhawk planet. Like this is the setting here, but it's not everything. So what we're planning on doing is we left it open to the game master, hey, it's a galaxy. There's billions of stars. You can do whatever you want. You want to drop the characters into a fantasy world, you can do that. Start pulling out some fantasy stuff. You want to make up something new, great. The Master Technician's Guide is going to have optional rules to go into different other sci-fi genres. Like you want some space horror, we can do that. You want some space western, kind of like your Firefly-ish thing.
Sure.
We can kind of go that route too. We're making rules for mecha combat. A lot of people are asking about that, and they were actually surprised when I said yes.
I want mecha combat, so that's great. I'm glad to hear that will be part of this. That's awesome, dude. I love to see blank spots on a map. I think that's having an established universe that then GMs can go off and play in their own area of is a great way to go, right? And D&D has really done that with the multiverse, right? Your players, your characters can go from a homebrew world into Eberron, into the Forgotten Realms, into Greyhawk, into Dark Sun, and then into the Nine Hells if you want them to, right? Having a galaxy is a way to do that is actually more believable because it is the way our universe actually works, right? And so it's like, oh, this makes more sense than jumping between parallel universes or whatever. This is going from one planet to the next. You're able to do that, which is really cool. Is Esper Genesis the kind of thing? Obviously, it's assumed that you're sort of hopping around the stars and stuff, but are you able to, if you wanted to, have a full campaign levels 1 through 20 on one planet?
You can work an Esper Genesis game just like any other D&D game. That's probably one thing I forgot to mention, is that it is our galaxy. So we here on Earth kind of have a concept of what's beyond our solar system. And we can name other planets and other galaxies and things like that, but it is so vast and so infinite that we don't really know what's out there. So in the Esper Genesis, in the galaxy that's set around Esper Genesis, there is Sol and Earth, and on Earth there are space colonies, and this is Earth of the future. So there's there are a lot of developments and a lot of wars and a lot of things like that. But yeah, you can run an entire campaign on Earth in the underlevels of New York City. You can run a whole game there. And it'll be just as fun as galaxy hopping. Obviously, there'll be a lot more aerial combat than starship combat.
Oh man, that is good stuff, man. Esper Genesis, people should check it out. How long did it take you, by the way? I think this is another thing we should talk about, because I do think I think a lot of people think game design in general is easy when it is not. But I also think people think hacks are easier when they're not. How long would you say it took you to develop Esper Genesis?
We started putting it together about 2 years ago. We started handing out postcards at Gen Con 2016. Esper Genesis coming soon, and we started the Kickstarter, and I started putting everything together. And yeah, I also learned it the hard way. People are like, "Oh, hacks are easy." No, they're really not. Especially when you're trying to keep the rules together. I guess it's a lot easier to hack something if you are at the same time, breaking it or breaking it down. This was an exercise in frustration at some points, because I wanted to create a game that was still 5e but sci-fi. To kind of hack that without taking rules away is a lot more difficult than it sounds. So it took the better part of a year to play test and put together everything and make sure that it works and make sure that it worked with everything else, because you want it to work with everything else. The point of making a fully compatible system is that somebody can bring in whatever rules they want and not have to retool or rework anything, and that is actually not easy to do. We actually only really got it all together late last year, when we come out with the basic rules, and even then, not everything was still fully tweaked and fixed.
Well, I have to say, as a fan of the game, I appreciate the work, and I appreciate that you tackled this the way that you did, because it does allow for just so much more to happen at the table. It allows for so much quicker grasp of the concept at the table, and really lets players get right into the story and enjoy the story. So thank you for all of the hard work you've done on this. In addition, thank you for all of the hard work that you're doing on DMs Guild Adept stuff. I think we would be remiss if we didn't give the listeners a little taste of what's to come, because obviously it's been announced that there is a new Wizards of the Coast release coming up. Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. First question, are you a Mordenkainen or a Mordenkainen guy? How do you pronounce it?
I am totally a Mordenkainen guy. Mordenkainen. That is the pronunciation of the old ways, as I guess.
It's funny. I go back and forth depending on who I'm talking to. Like if someone's, I'm such a follower, I guess, in that respect. If someone says Mordenkainen, I start with Mordenkainen. If somebody says Mordenkainen, I say Mordenkainen. Obviously we can't say too much about it or what's been planned because it hasn't been announced yet, but safe to say the Adepts will have some stuff going on for that will involve the new monsters in the book, right?
As well as some of the new interesting concepts that are introduced in the book. We just like any other Guild Adept product, we want to make sure that the players get something fun that they can use directly with the new book.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is exactly what I would want if I were buying this book to go along with it. And I think, Rich, you're sort of the project lead in many senses on this. So thank you for that. It's going to be a really fun thing that people should look forward to. And there are a lot of great minds working on this one, so I'm sure there will be more information about all of this coming up. Sorry, we're being so we're vague casting right now. This has been a blast to work on with this book. So, and it's always a blast to work with you, Rich. Rich, if people want to know more about you and about Esper Genesis, where should they go? What should they do?
We have an Esper Genesis Facebook group, which anybody can join and learn about what's going on. You can go to the homepage for the game at espergenesis.com. You can contact me directly on Twitter. I am at Skydawn1, and or you can email me, message me through Facebook. Nothing weird or anything like that. We also have that's actually something I didn't bring up. The core manual, which has been out on PDF for a week. It's on DriveThruRPG. I know you're probably going to link that at the end of the chat. So the basic rules is it's 160 pages. It's sort of like an introductory, goes up to level 10. The core manual is what actually has the full 9 races, 8 character classes, all of the rules and the expanded Starship Combat and all the Esper powers and everything like that. All of that is in the core manual. It's the first of 3 books. We just signed off on the proofs last week. It's going to print. It's printing right now. We're going to have hard copies. We're going to have the first hardcovers at the Origins Game Fair, which we will be selling at the Studio 2 booth. We are also starting. Well, we've sort of soft started it at a couple of other conventions, but now that the core manual is out, we'll also be producing the player's manual for the Crucible Core organized play, which is Esper Genesis' version of Adventurers League. Anybody who wants to get onto Origins and sign up for any of those events, we'll also be having those events at Gen Con, at PAX.
Oh, I have some time in my my Origin schedule. I should do some Crucible.
Yeah, absolutely. Jump on in.
Absolutely. No, that sounds awesome. I didn't realize you were doing your own organized play thing. That's ambitious.
Yeah. Well, we wanted to, for a lot of people, it is a role playing game without organized play. A lot of AL players just play AL. So we wanted that same sort of feel. We wanted people to be able to make Esper Genesis characters and follow their own career as a galactic hero. So we are going to have space factions and all that goodness. there'll be special certs, and the way we're actually running our organized play is going to be a little bit it's going to be a little bit different. We're going to have a recording system that will expand as the adventures come out, and a lot of the decisions that get made by the players, depending on how many are tallied, is actually going to change the course of the adventure path, or decide what happens in the next adventure path.
So it's even more ambitious than I originally thought.
Well, we get to kind of, it's less ambitious than it sounds. We kind of get to do that because we have a brand new galaxy. We're not beholden to anybody. We kind of get to do what we want with it.
That's true. You can blow stuff up if you want to. That's crazy.
Yeah, if you want to take part in developing the galaxy as it unfolds, definitely jump in. Keep an eye out for the Crucible Core Player's Manual. The hard copies of the core manual are going into distribution probably by the fall, but they will be available at Origins and Gen Con because we'll have copies of our own to sell, which Mr. James Introcaso will probably be getting one.
I will be purchasing one. It's so good, and it's such a beautiful book too. We didn't even talk about that. Like the art in this thing is incredible.
Yeah, we were lucky. We have really great work from Santi Casas and Tanho Sim, Marcus Vogt, who has some amazing art, and Storm Cook, who I skim a lot of his stock art all the time because it's useful for almost everything, and he's a really cool guy. And the art just came out for the core manual. The art just almost built the world, in itself. It's your first visual of what the galaxy is, so it's important that it's good.
Yeah, definitely. It's your first representation of your world, so people it sort of sets how all of these original things too that you're talking about need to look, right? Well, if people want to follow you, Rich Lescaflair, where should they go?
If they want to follow me, they can follow me on Twitter. I think I mentioned that. I am at Scott-on-1. You can go to the Esper Genesis website, and you can click on any of the social links there. That'll take you to either the Facebook group, or we also have our own Alligator Alley Entertainment. That is our production company that is producing Esper Genesis. You can also join our mailing list. We always love to talk to fans and people interested in the games that we're coming out with. So we'll be keeping in touch that way. Or that's kind of it. I have a much smaller media footprint, and we also have our Twitch. Just type in Esper Genesis Twitch on Google, and that'll come up. And as a matter of fact, 2 days ago, one of our fans had started an Esper Genesis Discord channel. So if you're on Discord, I'm kind of just getting used to Discord, but a lot of people are into it. You can find us there. Myself and the other Esper Genesis dev team, we're on there chit-chatting with everybody there.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rich, for joining me today on Tabletop Babble, and I hope you'll come back soon.
Thank you, James. Always fun. Always a pleasure.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Really check out Esper Genesis. I am a proud owner of the product, and I love it. I have some exciting game design news that is going to be coming up over the next month or so. It is really, really big for me, and we're definitely going to talk about it on the show when it drops. But if you want to hear about it before then, follow me on Twitter at James Introcaso, and head on over to my blog, worldbuilderblog.com, and I will be giving regular updates over there. Tabletop Babble is a show on the Don't Split the Podcast Network. Thanks to Rudy Basso for founding it with me. Our theme music, which you're listening to right now, was provided by Battle Bards. Don't forget that RPGs are like sex. Make sure the people that are doing it all have their schedule free and are actually coming to your house. Hey everybody, this podcast you just listened to was brought to you by Kobold Press. You know who they are, makers of fine RPG products like the Tomb of Mercy. The Tomb of Mercy is an amazing Death Trap dungeon from Sursa Victory. He was on this very show talking about Death Trap dungeons. Check out that episode because it will inform you how amazing Tomb of Mercy is. The Tomb of Mercy was built centuries ago to house arks that would preserve the souls of humanity from an infernal invasion. Now you must travel to the Wasted West, unseal the tomb, and send the last ark safely on its journey. Fail, and humanity faces extinction. In Tomb of Mercy, players compete with the GM in a race against time to see if humanity can be saved or if the fiendish servants of the hells corrupt the world. This adventure for 8th level heroes includes special timekeeping and resurrection mechanics to keep the pace exciting and the plot moving. 3 printable sets of cards for use during play. 6 gates, 6 monuments, and 6 wardens, plus 6 new monsters, 9 new magic items, and 6 pre-generated 8th level characters. Prepare to delve into the Tomb of Mercy, where the horned daughter of Famine and her minions await. Head to koboldpress.com or DriveThruRPG to pick up Tomb of Mercy now. Also wanted to let you know, this podcast is brought to you by Dice Envy. Dice Envy is a great website, diceenvy.com, that brings cool new dice to your door without breaking the bank. You can buy individually or get their awesome subscription boxes, which send mystery dice to your door for $5 or $15 a month. Check it out. Use the promo code DSPN10 at checkout for 10% off your order. Dice Envy is amazing. They have some really awesome dice on this website. If you want to go classic acrylic, man, they got it for you. They have some amazing purple and teal dice. They have some grayscale dice. The green layered dice are incredible. You can go get Healer's Die, which is really, really cool. It's like this special D8 for when you cast Cure Wounds. Oh man, they are just so awesome and clever here. You can also get metal dice. They have a really, really nice looking metal dice. This copper dice set just is incredible. The Alliance Blue looks really good. This gold, green chrome. Yeah, these are just amazing, amazing dice. Check out the Ruby Red D20. You can get mini dice, all kinds of great stuff over at diceenvy.com because you can never have too many dice.